Hey guys, we are going to solve this equation using the quadratic formula. So you've been given this equation. Your first instinct is probably to factor it, which is a great instinct. But when you try to factor it, it's not factoring very nicely, right? So you have two options from there. You can complete the square or do the quadratic formula. For this example, we're going to do the quadratic formula. If you do want to see me do the same problem, you just like the sound of my voice and want to see me do it completing the square, I'll link it in the corner, okay? All right, but here is our quadratic formula, okay? So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You're welcome. I'm going to regret singing that, but there it was for you, okay? Now, where are all these a's, b's, and c's coming from? Well, when our quadratic equation is set equal to 0, the number in front of my x squared is an a, in front of the x is b, and the number being added or subtracted on the back is c, okay? So me personally, I kind of like to list it off to the side so I don't forget, okay? So a is the number in front of my x squared, right? Which you might be tempted to say is 0, but there's actually an invisible 1 here, right? So a is 1, b is 6, and c is negative 10, okay? Now we just take these numbers and plug them in, okay? Making sure we pay special attentions to things like negatives and such, okay? So x equals negative b, okay? So we're gonna have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 10, okay, all over 2 times a, which is 1, okay? All right, it looks a little scary, but we're going to simplify it down, okay? So x equals, we're going to have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 times 6, 6 squared is 36, right? Minus 4 times 1 is just 4, right? 4 times a negative 10 is going to give me negative 40. So we're going to have minus a negative 40, okay? All over 2 times 1, which just gives me 2. Okay, looks a little better, kind of, but not really. All right, so here we are subtracting a negative, which goes positive, right? When you take away a negative, take something negative away from your life, that's positive, right? So this is actually 36 plus 40. So we're going to end up with x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 40 gives me 76 all over 2. That is kind of a funny looking plus or minus. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, what is my next step? I want to try and get rid of this radical if I can, or if I can't get rid of it, at least simplify it, okay? So if you plug the square root of 76 into your calculator, it's not going to be a pretty number. It's going to be an ugly decimal. So what we can do is try to at least break it down a little bit, okay? So if you need a review on this, I will link a video for you in the corner. But what we're going to do is find what we call the prime factorization of 76, okay? So we're trying to break it down. So I know that 2 times 38 gives me 76, right? And as I do this, I'm going to circle any prime numbers that I get to, okay? So 2 is prime. Then I can still break down 38 into 2 times 19, okay? And both of those are prime, okay? So what do I do from here? I look for any doubles. So see how I have 2 2's? 2 times 2 is 4, right? And the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to pull a 2 to the outside. So I'm going to have x equals negative 6 plus or minus, I'm pulling that 2 out, 2 square roots of, the only thing I have left when I pulled that out was 19, still under the radical, okay? And then this is still all over 2, Okay, you're like, it looks a little better, but it's still a little scary looking, right? Okay, we can get it to look a little better. The next thing I can do is distribute this 2. You might be used to using the distributive property with multiplication, but it also works with division. So since I can't add or subtract these on the top because of that square root, I would be stuck, except the distributive property tells me I can distribute this 2 to each side. So let me show you what that looks like if you're like, I don't get what you're saying. So what I'm saying is we can do -6 over 2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 19 over 2. The distributive property is what tells me I can do that. That's allowed, okay? So now, why did I want to do that? Well, because I'm going to be able to simplify it a little bit more, okay? So I'm going to end up with x equals -6 divided by 2 is going to give me a -3. Ooh, that looks a little better, right? Plus or minus these 2's simplify down to just a 1, right? So I'm left with 1 square root of 19, or we just write the square root of 19, okay? And I know it's kind of a bummer, but that is my answer, okay? Remember, the reason that we used the quadratic formula is because this didn't factor nicely, right? So we couldn't really expect it to have the answer be like 2 and 7, right? It's going to be something a little bit funky. Your teacher may want you to split it apart because there are 2 answers here. We have x equals -3 plus the square root of 19, right? And x equals -3 minus the square root of 19. You could even plug that into your calculator and get the ugly decimal if you wanted. Okay, but hopefully this made sense. If you want to check out that completing the square video with the same problem, I will link it in the corner. But hopefully this made sense. Thanks, bye.